Hey guys, Mike here. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the different controls you've got at each keyframe. So the majority of your programming is often going to be setting your keyframes and then your linear path and orbit moves. But if you need to tweak your program, often the best way to do that is by tapping on the keyframe, and it gives you a lot of controls there. So I'm going to walk you through all of those controls and explain to you what those do. So let's go ahead and jump into CCLab here, and I'll show you these different controls. So if you tap on one of these keyframes, any keyframe in the CCLab workspace, this tray pops up, and this is where you'll find the keyframe controls. So depending on which type of keyframe you're on, whether it's path or linear, or if it's in the target channel versus camera channel, there's going to be a couple of different options that you've got, and I'll show you all of those. So let's start with this one. We're on a path move, and we're in the time tab. There's a couple of different tabs. We're going to start in the time tab, and let's look at this top field right here. This is the keyframe time field. So this tells you exactly where in the timeline this keyframe is. So if I tap on that, I can actually input the time that I want. So if I want to go to 2.5 seconds, I can do that. Now I can also tap on this arrow key to the right, and that will change to duration. So this is actually the duration of that previous move. So you can see how both of those can be useful, and it's pretty easy to swap back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and go back to 2 seconds. Okay, below that you've got hold time and full stop. So if you look at this keyframe on the timeline, there's a dot right in the middle of it. That means that when it comes to this keyframe, it's going to stop for just a beat, and then it'll keep going. So the hold time, however, is if you want it to stop for more than just a beat, you can input, I want to stop for half a second and then continue on. That's how you would do that. I don't want a hold time, just stop for a beat, so I'm going to go back to 0, and we've got our full stop back to how it was. Over here, we've got normalized speed. And what that does is, I'm going to go ahead and turn off full stop for this example. And then I'm going to turn on normalized speed. And what that does, that tells CCLab that between keyframes 1 and 3, I want it to be a constant velocity, right? Because we're on a timeline now, we've got a couple things to think about, is the time between keyframes, but also the distance of the move between keyframes. And if you use the normalized speed, what that does, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to run, so it'll compile. So if you look on my timeline, it actually moved keyframe 2 to the right to be closer to 3. So that it will be a constant speed between keyframes 1 and 3, while still moving through your keyframe number 2. So I'm going to undo that, get back to where we were. Okay. All right, and back into my controls. I've got my ease in and ease out. So that is how you control the acceleration or deceleration, your feathering of the move. If I really want to ease out of a move, or if I want, let's say between 1 and 2 here, I have my full stop back. Between 1 and 2, if I really want to start the move quickly and then have it slow down at a nice slow pace, I might do something like this. Or I think the default is something like this, and this is usually looks pretty good. But you've got the option to adjust that ease in and ease out. All right, so in the time tab, the controls are basically the same for all of your keyframe types. There's not going to be any change there, except for in the target channel or the iris zoom channels, and there's a couple of different options depending on that channel. I'm not going to show you all of them because you basically in each one can manually input a value. So for my target, for example, I can go in and I can actually edit that focus value. So where is the target at this point in time? So I could, tap on this or this, and I can actually input. If I wanted to measure, for example, I could input 6 feet or whatever that value is. There's also, you'll see up here in the top right, an option to sync to camera. So what that means is that your ease in and ease out, your actual location on the timeline is tied to that camera keyframe. So if I move it, for example, it's going to move with it. If I adjust the ease in and ease out of my keyframe number 2, that would also adjust ease in, ease out of the target. And likewise, in your zoom channel or your iris or your triggers, I'm not going to get into those, but you can change those values as well. Okay, so let's move on to the path tab. If you look at the path tab, we've got a couple of different options here. So let's start with this option down here on the right, your finished path or continuous path. Let me actually turn off my full stop for this example. So between 1 and 3, we've got keyframes 1, 2, and 3, right? Let's say keyframe 1 is here, keyframe 2 is up here, keyframe 3 is over here. With continuous path on, what it's going to do is it's going to create a spline between any subsequent path keyframes. So I could have as many as I want, 8, 9, 10, 100 keyframes, and they're all path moves. It's going to create a spline, a nice smooth spline between all of those. Now, I've only got 3 here, but it's good enough for this example. If I turn this now to full stop, and I go to finish path, that's going to break up this path move. So that's what the finish path is going to do. It just is a way to break up your path moves. If you don't want one continuous move between your 100 path keyframes, wherever you want the break, you say full stop and you change that to finish path. So in this example, what I've done is now I've got a path move from 1 to 2, and then I've got another path move from 2 to 3. And since it's just those 2 keyframes on each of those, it's just going to be a line. So let's talk about sync roll. I don't really want to get too in depth on sync roll in this video. If you want a lot of detail, watch this other tutorial video, and I'll go into the difference between having it on and off. But for now, just know that there are a couple of different ways to calculate the roll in a move. The default is having sync roll on. As a rule of thumb, if you're running a move and the roll in that move looks a little weird, just turn it off and run it again. I found that pretty often that is going to fix my problem. So let's go ahead and just move on. And if you want to watch that video on sync roll, I'll put the link in the video. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this keyframe between these 2 linear moves. Now, when you've got 2 linear moves next to each other, C2 Lab can't do that continuously, right? Say you're trying to do a move, again, 1, 2, 3. Physics doesn't like changing directions instantly, so there's a couple different options for handling this. The first is just to add a full stop. And again, that's just gonna stop for a beat and then keep moving. If you don't want to do that, you can come into here into the path tab, and you've got curve control. So you can turn on your curve control. You can actually control how much curvature you want between those 2 lines, and then it'll smooth that out. So if you've got 1, 2, 3, it'll actually curve and cuts off that corner. It doesn't actually hit that corner in this case. So that is your curve control. 2 more things I want to show you here. And you'll see this every time you've got this tray open. So you've got update position and delete. Update position is a great way if you're editing an actual keyframe, or really what it's doing is overwriting. So if I've got a keyframe here, and actually I just want to tilt down just a little bit. I'll make that change. I'll actually move the robot to that position, and then I say update position, and that overwrites the current keyframe. So now when I run through the move, I'm actually tilted down a little bit more at this point. Finally, delete does just what you think it would. It actually deletes that keyframe. So that is a quick overview of those options and controls you've got in each keyframe. Go ahead and play around with those, and thanks for watching.